All right, Brian Teyssier here. Welcome to Measure Twice, Cut Once podcast. Have you ever wondered how, and this is something I wonder, how a brand new house, where does the builder start? How is it built in the exact perfect location? How is each floor perfectly done when you move in? That's because of architects like John, and he's going to tell us every little detail about it. Why? Because we're talking real estate, real estate, real estate. John Porter, tell me, I know who you are. For our audience, who are you and why are you here?
First of all, thank you for having me.
Yes.
My name is John Porter. I work at Desmone. We're an architecture and interior design firm out of Pittsburgh. I actually work out of our Morgantown office. Been there for 5 years, working on 6.
It's key to note that you are in different locations because I'm familiar with the Lawrenceville area, and you guys, your company has one of the most beautiful buildings down there.
Yeah, we do.
And I automatically assumed I'm also a client. We'll get into that as well, of John's. And I thought I was going to just riding my bicycle down, walking down to that beautiful building. I think I was in there once before I learned you're in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in the day and age of Zoom and Teams and so forth, I mean, we have projects in Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
We go all over the place. So it's definitely a different process than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
It definitely works out really well because we're so close to you guys.
So Desmone is typically east coast of the United States, or do you go?
We have some projects out actually in like Colorado. There's a guy in our Pittsburgh office, Jeff, who does projects out there. We've done projects, in other countries too. For that matter, too. Yeah,
that's crazy.
But mainly it's that Mid-Atlantic region. It's kind of where we're at.
So we talked about where you work. What do you actually do? Let's define this. And we talked about this before we even started the podcast. For those people that, and until 2 years ago, I really didn't know what an architect did either. So what is kind of the loose definition of an architect?
Yeah.
And what is your role in the whole new construction?
So for me personally, I do a little bit of everything, and Desmone as a whole does everything as well. But I focus mainly on residential at the moment. I've done a bunch of commercial work, a bunch of industrial work. I have, project sizes from a new street sign to 480,000 square feet industrial building that's over in Wheeling, West Virginia area. So it ranges from everything, honestly.
So, but tell me the definition of an architect. What do you swing hammers?
No, I don't. So everything that I do is all on the computer. For the most part, it's definitely a different mindset than what an architect was 20 years ago, 30 years ago when it was drafting in CAD and stuff like that.
They still use CAD? Because I actually learned CAD.
They do, yeah. So civil engineers and stuff, they use CAD, and then we'll take those models and put it into Revit. So Revit is what we use. It's a 3D BIM process. So I'll draw the plan in 2D, and then I can see the elevations and the entire building in 3D from there.
Wow.
So it's definitely...
That sounds fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like a video game model.
Yeah.
It's like what you see on that is what you do on a daily basis.
Right. I'm going to jump around a little bit. We have a bunch of bullet points I want to get to, but my most interesting one is not about how many exams you have to take in this 3740 hours, which we're going to get into, but let's talk about the spec home residential new construction process. What is the process from the very beginning on your side as an architect? What are your roles and responsibilities? Everybody needs to know this before they even start, because I know a lot of flippers, bathroom modelers that are going to become developers and builders all of a sudden. And it's always about the safety. I don't know about in your industry, but they always teach us as realtors is it's always about the safety of the public. That's the number one thing. It's never about your paycheck. It's never about your clients' wants or needs. It's about their safety. So what does an architect do from step one whenever we're thinking about building a spec home?
Yeah, so if it's a new construction spec house, we work with developers like yourself or a private client too, for that matter. Comes to us and they want to do a spec house, but it's for them. So those are the two different types of residential that we do a lot of times. But from what we would do is we get engaged from the client or yourself. We would write a proposal and from there everything works out like in contract scope.
I'm gonna pause on you real quick because. Let's just say, I went through this. How many bedrooms do I want? What bathrooms do I want? I mean, do I come with pictures from Instagram?
Yeah, so a lot of times with developers, they already have an idea of what they want, like you said, from projects that they've worked on in the past, or if it's from Instagram or stuff they've seen on Google as a whole.
Right.
So from there, what we can do is we formulate those design concepts and put it into an actual like design concept that's our own, or,
right?
You know, the developer and ourselves. And from there, you know, just build on it and see where it goes.
And you build the floor plans based on codes, and like you have to know all the codes and stuff like that. Like the developer doesn't have to know that. Pretty much from what I'm learning is the developer just writes the checks.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. More or less. Yeah.
That's so funny because I have I represent other builders and developers, and the buyer's agent and the buyers will sometimes say, "Well, who's the developer?" I'm like, to the construction of your house, it doesn't give a shit who the developer is. They're just there writing the checks.
Well, and a lot of times with developers too, it can be just one developer, it could be a team of developers too, and a lot of times it changes from property to property too. So you might be working with somebody else, and then from there go to another site and work with another person. So it all changes too. It all is different for every project type and every project location.
And I'm sure there's different. I'm sure developers can get a little more in detailed, a little more hands-on. So as an architect, do you prefer to have developers that are more hands-on, or do you prefer to like, hey, tell me your vision board, I'm going to shoot it over to you, we're going to go back and forth a couple times and get the dimensions right and the exterior skin right, just kind of leave me alone? And
yeah, I mean, so for me personally, I like having at least something to start with, a concept at least to work with, or a style, because it's much easier to take that style and run with it from there. But from the developer standpoint, it's nice to be able to have somebody who's kind of in between. Okay. You know, if you have somebody who's, you know, so engaged that they're calling you every single day,
right,
it can take more time, whereas you have a person who's not engaged at all, you know, then you don't know where to go essentially with it. So it's always good to have like a middle ground and have some direction. And the biggest thing in this field, and you know this from your job experience too, is that communication is key. So picking up the phone, if you have a simple question, you just call and talk to somebody, or if you have an email, just shoot them back and forth, and you know, you get an answer resolved quicker that way than, you know, sitting on it for a couple weeks.
Yeah, my business partner Andrew is very good at that. I mean, there were times we had meetings or lunch. He's like, "Let me just call John."
Yeah,
and dude, you're always...
Yeah, it's right there.
You're always on it. You're like me. Like, why put it off until tomorrow whenever I could just answer the phone call, text, or email right now?
Correct, yeah.
All right, so let's go through the process, if you don't mind, step by step. I bring you an idea. You put it in your computer system and shoots out what? Floor plans?
It does, yeah. So, I mean, it's not as simple as that, but what we would do is, you know, take that idea, we put it in there, and we create the floor plans, we create elevations, you know, we'll create renders too. So if you want to see it or sell it to a client or, you know, a potential client, you can sell that render. It's much easier for people to see the physical thing and what it could potentially look like.
Right. And it varies by municipality, right?
It does.
You and I do work a lot in the city of Pittsburgh. It's got to be the toughest place.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing work all over the place, you know, and Pittsburgh is definitely the most difficult.
Right.
But, you know, there's a rhyme and reason to why they do what they do. So it definitely benefits the people and the community for what they do. But it is more difficult.
So as a developer, I'll tell you, listen, I want a 2,300 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house, and you have automatic go-to floor plans, or?
No, not really. No, honestly, I mean, it's a lot of the same floor plate, like, because a lot of the city itself is designed on like 25 foot by 100 foot lots. You know, so you have the same floor plate you can start with. But it changes because every client is different, every project is different. You know, if you're in one area, you know, you might have a $700,000 house, whereas you have another area, you could have a $400,000 house.
Right.
So that changes kind of the mindset of how things are opened or closed off in the space itself. And the same with the elevations too, and how you look at the materials. And you know,
so what's an elevation for those of us that don't know?
Yeah, so the elevation is like the front facade or side facades of the house itself. So it's what you see when you first walk up to the home, essentially.
Okay. All right, so if you watch my pros and cons videos, buyers, you know it's a pretty good option in this crazy market to buy something brand new. Either it's already being built, that's already built, brand new construction, or something you can get on early. You pick your finishes, etc. You want to contact the Brian Sells brand, no matter where you're at. If you're in the Pittsburgh market, if you're in the Southeast Florida market, I don't care if you're over in Wisconsin. I've got spider webs of colleagues just like me across the United States and Canada, so I can refer you to somebody that can meet your needs. If you are a buyer that is struggling to get a house, contact the Brian Sells brand now.
But, you know, with that, it changes, like I said, with materials and such. I mean, you know, the complexity of the form itself. And,
right.
You know, how
two-car garage, rooftop deck, elevator, plumb for an elevator.
Yep. Yeah, all those things are different things that you give us as a developer, you know, it changes the entire floor plan. So
right.
there's not really a cookie cutter way to do it, essentially.
And there's so many regulations you don't know as a consumer out there. You can only have a certain percentage of the front as glass, the side is glass.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, so with the residential code, there's different things, setback requirements that you have to follow, and that's a zoning code issue.
Setback would be what?
A setback is, so you have your property line, and you have to be set back off the property line from...
The structure has to be set back.
The structure has to be set back.
Okay.
So a lot of that is, it's different guidelines for different parts of the city too.
Right.
So
so it varies within the city.
It does, yeah. So there's different zoning districts in the city. So if you're in Lawrenceville, for example, a lot of the houses are 0 feet setbacks on the front, and there's 0 feet on the side, and you can reduce it down to 3 feet on the sides or on the front as well.
0 feet meaning you can go build right on the property line.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, why would any developer want to make it smaller?
So a lot of times it's actually not what the developer wants, but it's actually what fits into the urban fabric of what's there. So if the entire street has 0 foot front setbacks, you want to keep that same house continuous all the way down, especially if you're doing, a row of townhouses. You want everything to be, every area and every community has its kind of this own urban fabric that you're trying to match.
Very cool.
I mean, we do new construction, but you don't want it to be so new construction that it stands out from what's there.
Right.
Yeah.
Are most 0 setbacks, and that's 0 setbacks all the way around?
No, so it would be on the front mostly. If you're in a corner lot, you could do it on there as well. Right. If you're in a district that has attached townhouses, you could do 0 feet on the sides as well. But a lot of times you'll keep it 3 feet off the side. That helps with, so you can allow windows on the sides when you do that.
Oh, right.
Or it helps with the spread of fire too between houses as well. So if you do less than 3 feet, you can't do windows. So it's
right. I see in my mind, I'm picturing all the row houses like we're pigeonholing a house into between two other houses.
Yeah.
Sometimes 0 setbacks fine because there's a house right there smacked up against there anyway. And I know some of the problems we had for you first-time developers is trying to get skinny siding guys because
it's hard.
The house might have to be a foot from the other house or 2 feet, but you got to somehow skin it on the outside.
Yeah, that's the tricky part about putting anything closer to 3 feet.
Right.
You can't get a body back there at that point.
You literally need a body to put that nail or whatever they do to get the siding on there.
Yeah.
They need to create a product that is somehow there's a track and they can roll it down or push it down, something like that.
That would be nice.
We need to come up with that.
Yeah.
What I want, you send some floor plans over, we look at it and we agree, and then the next step is electrical.
So the next step from there, especially in the city of Pittsburgh, is submit to zoning.
And let's keep it to the city of Pittsburgh. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be other people watching from different parts of the country, world, or city, but let's just keep it to the city of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so from there, you'd submit to zoning because they have to review everything, make
online,
sure
right?
Yeah, everything is on the one-stop portal.
Which is new.
It's new, yeah. It's about 3 years old, I think, now. Before you had to go downtown and submit everything in paper form, and it took a lot longer. This process is definitely a lot easier, and it's, makes everything quicker.
Right, so you just hit the enter button and it's like, pew!
More or less, yeah. Yeah, but so you submit to them. From there, if you have everything that's perfect on there, you'll move forward with it. But a lot of times, you have to ask for a variance. So what a variance is, it's you don't meet certain aspects of the zoning code or, of that district's code itself. So like, for example, the setbacks, if you have a lot of communities in their district will have a 10-foot setback requirement.
Wow.
So, or a 15-foot, I mean, for that front setback.
Okay.
So from there, you need to request a variance to have that 0-foot front setback.
How long does a variance usually take, and how does that process work? Another enter button type thing?
More or less. I mean, for at least the setting up factor of it. But a lot of it is communications with the city of Pittsburgh itself and their zoning board.
Calls? Emails?
It's all emails. And you'll go back and forth with them a couple times to get.
You will?
Yeah, I will. As the architect, I will do that. And we'll keep you in the loop as the developer itself.
Right.
But we handle all that communication a lot of times. And some people too, they'll hire lawyers to do that as well if it's a more tricky thing.
Developers hire lawyers sometimes?
Yeah, I've seen that happen as well. But from the process itself, it takes roughly 30 days to 60 days to get scheduled for a zoning hearing. And then once you get scheduled, it's another roughly 30 days after that.
This is why they take so long to build in the city of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
How long does a variance take to get approved or disapproved?
So a lot of times you'll do your presentation and you have to wait 45 business days after that until you actually get a decision.
Are you kidding me?
No, that's what it is.
Why?
I don't know. That's just what it is.
City of Pittsburgh, if you're watching, I need to get you on here because I need to ask you why this takes so long, especially with everything online. Like, you should be able to almost have a bot
Well, I mean, it has to go through the different segments and make sure everybody is approving of what the variance is.
Still, I want to see I want to see the city of Pittsburgh is doing on hourly. I want to account for every minute and see why we can't push this stuff through. Because it's painstakingly long to build in the city of Pittsburgh, and it shouldn't take that long.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, I went off on a soapbox tangent. Feeling that pain. Okay, so variance approved, electric, plumbing. Where's all that stuff coming?
So say everything is done with the variances in your zoning. Once you get all approval from there, you'll start design development, which is the second phase of the project. From there, you start really honing in on the structural elements, the MEP elements. If there's more civil elements that go into it, you'll do that. And then from there, you'll be able to submit those drawings for a building permit. And at that point, the contractor can, once everything is approved on the building permit side, the contractor can actually start to build the project.
When you say civil, what does that mean?
So
ground?
Civil is all the groundwork.
Okay.
It has to do with, there's different segments of that too. There's landscaping on top of that too. For spec house residential, you don't usually get into MEP and civil. A lot of times, the contractor itself can handle those elements of it. Now, if you're doing a more commercial project, you have to have those elements because there's more risk involved in it.
There's a couple projects I know of in Pittsburgh that are freestanding row houses, whatever, brand new, but they're on building on hillsides, so they need to have something called Geotech.
Yeah.
What is that?
So
for those that don't
Geotech.
know?
So Geotech. Well, this whole region as a whole is a lot of it's been mined.
Yeah.
And the soils here are bad. So Geotech is what they do is they come in and they'll do a boring. So it's essentially like how you drill a well, more or less. You drill down and you test the soils, and they take a sample of it, and you see if it's a clay soil or if it's silty soils, and from there, that determines how the foundation actually is built.
Wow, an engineer does that?
Yeah, so there's a geotech engineer, and then they'll write a report, and they give that report to the structural engineer, who then designs the foundations.
Let me guess, it takes 45 days to get that done.
Roughly, yeah.
Guys, are you adding that up?
Yeah.
Fascinating. So that's another ripple. That's another delay, another layer of complexity, but it's something that's essential.
Yeah, so if you can find a lot that's actually flat and doesn't have those issues, it's always better for you as a developer or a homeowner in that sense.
Right.
But if it's on a hillside, a lot of times you're going to end up doing those things. Or if there's history of mines or being undermined as a whole, those are things that you're going to have to keep in track.
All right, you are a developer, you're a builder, you're a flipper, you just don't know what agent to hire. You want to hire the Brian Sells brand. Why is that? Because just like this Measure Twice, Cut Once podcast that is specific to new construction, I have a buyer client list that is looking for a flip, is looking to build a brand new house with a 2-car garage, or looking for a luxury manse. They're going to be watching this podcast. So I have those buyers. It makes sense to hire the Brian Sells brand to list your properties. You want to get me in super early. I like to be in the very beginning so I could help point you to what buyers want. And another perk that a lot of my flippers, developers, and builders absolutely love is I do all the social media for them. The Lawrenceville Lofts, I'm doing the social media there. You could pay a company to thousands of dollars to do social media. They don't know real estate. They're not on site. They just don't get it. I have experience since 2007 doing this. I will be automatically doing my social media, and by default, your social media gets done too. So if you're a builder, developer, or flipper in the Southeast Florida market or the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania market, contact the Brian Sells brand now.
I keep pulling you away from the HVAC and electrical. I'm going to let you get to it this time.
Yeah.
So where does that come in?
So, like I said,
sewer taps.
So a lot of times that's more on the contractor side, especially for spec residential.
Okay.
A lot of those elements, we don't handle. At least our firm does not. And in the way, I've done this.
Your GC would handle that.
Yeah. The way I've done this for the last 4 or 5 years or so is, that's always on the GC.
Right.
We'll help out wherever we can. I usually will do the electrical side of things because I had to plan out the light fixtures and how everything works in the space.
Right.
And I'll do the switch plans, to where your light switches when you walk into the room. Those are simple things that people forget about when you're in a space, but if your light switch is on the other side of the room, it makes it more difficult.
And this is code. This is what you went to school for. And I'm sure you're constantly updating your education with the new codes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's on your shoulders to make this right. It's not on me as a developer. I just write the check.
Yeah.
And the GC just does what you tell him, basically, right?
More or less. Yeah. I mean, but we're also leaning on them too, because you
Right.
know, just as much education and experience as we have as the architect or engineer or whatever, you know, the GC has the buildable side that we don't have. You know,
Right.
we don't see that on a daily basis. So it goes back to the communication factor that I talked to you before about. You know, having that communication with a good team of people makes the job go so much smoother.
Crazy. And in
Yeah.
HVAC, they do their own report based on square footage, right? To figure out how many
Yeah.
furnaces and air conditioners and all that stuff. You don't do that.
No, we don't do that.
Right. So then you don't do anything with HVAC.
No.
But you
we
still
don't.
put the runs and all that on the.
Yeah, so we'll plan for it. So especially with townhouses in the city of Pittsburgh, you need to create a run in the house, a vertical run or chase itself, to where that that duct system can go up, because the condensing unit will sit outside, which is what actually creates the cool air essentially, and then it goes from the furnace, and that furnace is what blows the air through the space. So if you don't plan for these ducts that potentially are 12 inches by 24 inches, then you just have this huge hole or huge duct that's in your space that you didn't want to see.
Nowadays, that's.
Yeah, I mean, if you do like a double walled duct, which is a round duct that you see in more modern like loft style houses, that's what people want to see. But a lot of times you don't do that, especially with spec builds, because they tend to be on the lower end of cost of construction. If you had a client who is involved in it, then you sometimes want to approach it that way, because those are design features that people want, but not everybody wants that.
Right.
And when you're doing spec, you kind of keep it that vanilla box more or less.
You don't know who the buyer is.
Yeah, you don't know who the buyer is, and you want to approach it so that the masses will like it.
Right.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So I guess that takes us all the way kind of to the end, and then from there you're kind of done, right?
No, not really.
Okay.
So once we give the drawings and stuff to the contractor to build, there'll be questions that come up, because everything is not perfect.
Right.
In the perfect world, everything is great and you're done, and the plans are exact what they are. But there's always things that pop up. You'll have soil conditions that are bad. You'll have an electrical line that you didn't know was buried below the ground.
Shale.
Yeah, you'll have issues with that. I mean, there's always issues that happen. Or you'll get into the space as a developer and you say, hey, I found a client that I want to sell this to. And that client says, I don't want that kitchen there. I want it to be in the back instead.
We're talking about that right now. My business partner, Andrew, wants to sell it before it's done. And as a realtor, I'm like, let's just finish it.
Yeah.
Get all the finishes, and then you stage it, and they have no option on what to change, because as an architect, there's going to be changes coming in left and right. No buyer wants exactly what you're going to put out. They want to
It's
change
never
something.
that way. Very rarely do you ever have a project that's, your final drawings to the time they actually move in. It very rarely happens.
So now, what I'm starting to see as a realtor is, we had all this open floor plan type of stuff, which is still popular, but I'm starting to see with the pandemic that people are wanting things more a little blocked off, compartmentalized, like back in the 50s and that when they used to build the houses. So in the higher end price points, I'm starting to see a desire, I'm not gonna say requirement, a desire for two independent offices. They don't have to be huge. They just can't have the husband, wife, whatever the dynamic is there in the same office at the same time, every day, all day, banging on the phone or whatever. Are you starting to see, give us a little insight on what type of forecast you're seeing on floor plan changes?
Yeah, I mean, so you're correct in that, and what we see is, and I think a lot of it goes to the technology side of what we do on a daily basis. People are working at home more, so they want that dedicated office.
Right.
And especially too, if you have two spouses that are there at the same time, and they both have Zoom calls going on.
Yep.
It's impossible to hear each other.
Right.
In the background, and it's also the mindset, at least for me personally, as an individual, is. It's separation of space too. Yes, you're working at home, but a lot of times you have your work life and your home life, and you don't want them to intermingle. So people want that dedicated space to be their own, and then they can go home and be in their comfortable space.
Back me up on this if you can. I'm starting to see at least two interior living spaces. Like a finished basement was always big in this Pittsburgh area, but two interior finished living spaces are really becoming a big deal because of the pandemic.
Yeah, they really are.
I'm seeing two laundry rooms, or at least enough laundry, a little more higher end, big enough, a laundry room big enough for two wash and dryers if you have 3 kids or something.
Yeah, a lot of times, at least with the townhouses in Pittsburgh, they'll have the stack laundry at the master bedroom.
Yep.
And you have like a whole floor as a master suite.
Yep.
And you'll do that laundry room there. And then you go down to the first floor or the second floor, wherever it's at, and you'll do another laundry room there, because that's where the kids are at, or that's where whoever else is there.
Right.
You don't have to walk up and down the flights of stairs.
Love that.
It makes it easier, and you can live in place at that point, you know.
So the podcast that you're watching has been taken off and is finally growing in leaps and bounds. So I'm now opening up sponsorship. Why would you want to sponsor? Well, because you are a drywall supplier. You are a quartz countertop supplier. You are a builder, right? You want to get your name, your product out in front of a specific target market audience. Guess what? This Measure Twice, Cut Once podcast you're watching, it specifies to vendors just like you that need your product. So I'm opening up sponsorships. Feel free to contact me in any platform. The sponsorship cost is minimal compared to what you're paying if you're paying for TV commercials, Google ads, etc. And it's going to get you a much more specific audience. So contact me now for sponsorship opportunities. Measure Twice, Cut Once podcast.
Let's talk about real quick. We're going to go off a little bit of a tangent. Parking in this, keeping in mind in the city of Pittsburgh, how important and what are you seeing as parking?
Yeah, so the way the city has looked at it is if you do attached townhouses, parking on the front
Or
is,
row houses.
Yeah, row houses.
Okay.
And so in the row house standpoint, you know, the city doesn't really want you to have a parking garage off the front, especially with how narrow our streets are up here.
Because it's hard to make the radius?
It's hard to make the radius, and you have, you know, 50 other houses on the street potentially, and, you know, they have 1 to 2 cars each. So if I put a driveway and a garage to my thing, I'm now taking up, you know, potentially 16 feet or down to 8 feet of space to where you can't park a car there, and also that person has to be able to back up, like you said.
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
so
a lot of times they'll force that driveway and that garage to the back of the house.
That's interesting. Although, wouldn't you be? I mean, if you're parking a car or two in the garage, you're taking it off the street.
You are, yes, but it's also trying to keep the community, you know, safer too, because you have people that walk down the sidewalk, and if I'm backing up out of my garage, I potentially just hit that person.
Right.
You know, so you want to try to avoid that, and it may not be an issue for one house, but if you get a whole row of houses, you know, you just start getting this up and down effect too with the sidewalk, it makes things more cumbersome to walk on.
That makes sense. So would you agree that the most valuable parking in the city of Pittsburgh would be 2 cars side by side, followed by 2-car tandem, followed by 1-car garage, followed by off street, followed by the least desirable would be on street?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the order that we go in.
And we try our best as developers and with you to trying to get that garage.
Yeah.
It's almost like if the house is a certain size square footage, you just have to have 2. And man, it kills me to do 2-car tandem on our houses, but it is definitely better than having it sit on the street. Because if you're going to buy a 2,600 square foot house for $775,000, probably going to have a BMW, probably going to have a Mercedes you've been dreaming of, and they ain't going to want that shit sitting outside.
No, and especially with our weather we have here. 4 months of the year you're getting snow, and people don't want to get out there and you know, clean off the snow with their car.
Oh, absolutely. Even if you have
7 o'clock in the morning.
Even if you have auto start, I mean, you still got to worry about people knocking.
Oh, yeah.
I see, anytime I'm walking on the street, I always see at least one car where the mirror's dangling. I'm thinking they wish they had off-street parking or a tandem garage.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I think that was really good insight for those people thinking about building a house, thinking about being developers, thinking about being builders. My clients that are wondering why it's taking so long for me to develop their house or my developers to build their house. It's a big, arduous process, and we just kind of skimmed it. I mean, there's all kind of delays that can go through there. But so let's talk about what it takes to be an architect. We talked about it a little bit before. Tell me, I was astonished by how much education you have to have.
Yeah, so it's different for everybody. What you have to do, at least what I had to do, I'll just talk about my experience.
Yeah, please.
So I had to go to a 4-year undergrad. I actually went to Fairmont State, which is in West Virginia.
I know where that's at.
Yeah, it's actually the only architecture school in all of West Virginia, which is surprising.
What?
Yep. Yeah, so I went there. I got my 4-year undergrad.
Right out of high school?
Right out of high school.
So you got all the English and all the other...
all that fun stuff is all taken care of.
It's a beautiful campus.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's a small campus, but it's really nice in that community there.
It's the only architecture school in where?
In all of West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant all of America. I was like, what?
No. There's plenty more.
And you're from West Virginia?
No, actually, I'm originally from Maryland.
Okay.
So I moved out to West Virginia. I looked at playing sports out there originally, baseball and football.
Cool.
And then I didn't actually play, but, you know, I still was there. And then I met my wife there, so that's why we're still in West Virginia.
Sure. It's beautiful down in West Virginia.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a nice little area. So once you graduate from there, though, you have to go get a master's degree, or you have to go to. So if you have a 5-year program which is accredited through NAB, which is, you know, the process of how you get certified as a school, you can do 5 years instead. But for me, I had to go get a master's degree, so I went to Miami University in Ohio.
Why'd you have to get a master's? type of engineering you want or architecture you want to do?
No, it's just as an architectural license to get that process, you have to have that master's degree, or you have to have the accredited 5-year program.
Okay.
And Fairmont State wasn't accredited at the time, but they are working towards the process of getting accredited for their master's degree program now.
Okay.
So anyway, I went to Miami, which is in Ohio. It was actually the original Miami.
Ben Roethlisberger?
Yep. Yeah, Ben Roethlisberger, Jim Harbaugh.
Did you ever see him?
Or John Harbaugh? Huh? No, he was actually before me.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he's a tad bit older than me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from there, once you graduate with your master's degree, you then have to find a job, which is a lot of times the hardest part.
Really? So they don't recruit out of the job market's always different.
It is, yeah.
I don't know what it's like now. I mean, for architects.
Yeah, so I luckily came out when I was in undergrad. I was kind of at the recession, like the tail off of the recession in 2008. So people weren't hiring. So I personally never had an internship in undergrad. But when I got to grad school, I had multiple offers out of grad school.
Nice.
I had, probably 4 or 5 offers. And the number one advice that I was always given is go to grad school where you kind of want to work. So I wanted to be in this mid-Atlantic region more or less, long term. So that's why I went to grad school there.
Because you can it's easy to get a job there because they see.
It's all about connections.
Right.
School is all about connections. For example, say if you went to Miami as well, and you worked in Baltimore or whatever,
right.
and I applied to your firm, and you knew Miami University,
right?
You might be more inclined to hire me as that individual.
Interesting.
Yeah. So from there, like I said, it's the hardest part is trying to get that job. So from that point, you have to work under an architect. For 3+ years, you have to get above 3,000 hours. It's like 3,700 hours total.
You're getting paid at this point?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they actually made it a rule at one point in time to where if you work as an intern, you have to get paid.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, because you're making money for the business,
right?
Everybody needs to live and
right.
and make money. So
yeah.
So from there, you just have to work in doing that. And once you graduate, you can apply to get your license. And from there, you have to take 6 exams. So, yeah.
Hard exams?
They're definitely difficult.
Because they're the exams that try tricking you. Like for my real estate exam, I don't know so many people have a real estate license. It's a hard test to take.
Yeah.
So there's 4 multiple choices, and I can make a case for at least 2 of the answers being correct on almost every question. It's only, is it 50 questions? How many questions? How long?
So it all depends. They range. The lowest one I think was 80 questions, and I think the highest 2 were 120. And you have like 4 hours to take them, roughly.
And do you
3
have
to 4 hours.
Do you have to solve problems and build stuff?
You don't have to build anything on the model or anything like that, like in Revit, like what we use.
Right.
The older exam process you had to use like a program that looked kind of similar to CAD.
Which I can see that would make sense. They should kind of test you on what you're going to be physically.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, nowadays it's not that way though. It's more multiple questions. It's kind of doing the math of figuring things out and going that process as well.
And you have computer programs to figure out the math, right?
We do, yeah. And they've geared the test more towards that as well. So before you had to remember the codes for the exam. A lot of times nowadays in the new process, the codes are there. You get segments of codes and then you can take your exams from that.
Wow.
So it makes it easier.
6 exams.
6 exams, yeah. But the way the exams are structured is much more practical in how you're actually going to do your job.
That's what
it makes it easier on our end.
Why 6? Are these 6 different?
So there are different phases, and and it kind of aligns with how architecture goes and that process of from the minute you talk to me as your client or as my client to the minute the project is finished. So you'll have the schematic design development, construction documents, and construction administration phases. Those are kind of how the exams are built out as well.
Wow.
And it's just, how do you develop a project from start to finish? And that's what they test you on, because that's what you're going to do.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I'm soapbox again. The real estate test is ridiculous. They make us do mortgages longhand with no calculator.
Oh.
I'm going to tell you now, as a realtor, you don't want any realtor doing any type of math, especially without a calculator. It's insane.
Yeah.
So let's start wrapping up. Let's talk about Desmone. How long have you been there? How long have they been around? What type of service? Touch on this type of services they offer. We talked about it earlier.
So Desmone has been around since 1958. We've been in Pittsburgh that entire time. We recently opened up the Morgantown office, which is going on 7 years at this point, a little bit over 6. We just had our 6-year anniversary.
Okay.
We do anything and everything, basically. The biggest things we don't really touch on is K through 12 education, but we do anything, honestly.
Industrial, commercial.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, I mean, we're not a generalist firm, but we also kind of are. We kind of specialize in certain things, but we're willing to look at any project that is going to be a benefit to the community.
Interesting. And why did you choose architecture versus a fireman or policeman or a realtor?
Yeah, so for me, the story kind of goes back to my parents and my grandfather at that point too. Excuse me. So my grandfather was a contractor. Sorry.
That's all right.
He was a contractor, and he was one of the ones who built the Baltimore Zoo and some other big projects in Maryland as a whole. And unfortunately, I was young when he passed away, but that mindset of what he did and what my parents brought to me and their knowledge of what he did and so forth, it was kind of instilled in me from a young age. And my parents were both real estate agents, so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they both were. And they did it part-time, but it was still that was the thing to do back in the day. Is like
shit.
We had a house in Ocean City, Maryland, and I'd always remember we'd go down to houses and look at the different floor plans and
that's cool.
All the things that were being built, and it's just like as a little kid, that's what's instilled in you, and you kind of
geek out over it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, so like I can remember back probably from first grade when they ask you like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I think I had a paper that my mom found it said I wanted to be an architect.
No kidding.
Or I wanted to be a builder or whatever.
Right.
So I've always kind of wanted to do that more or less my entire career, and here we are.
Being an architect is much better, I'm sure. You're in a controlled environment, controlled climate environment.
Yeah, I give those people who are out in the heat all day props. I couldn't do it. There's no way.
Especially when I go to Miami and I see these guys working on the heat. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious.
120 degrees sometimes.
They're wearing I'm half naked trying to breathe, and they're wearing long sleeves and hats and everything else. That's the way to do it. So we're going to finish up with some of my favorite questions, and that is, what is one thing you wished your client did do to make your life easier, to make the job easier, and one thing you wish clients wouldn't do to facilitate the job coming from start to finish a lot easier?
Yeah, I think it goes back, honestly, for both points is the communication factor.
Okay.
If I have a client who communicates really well, it makes my job easier because, I try to pride myself personally, and Desmone as a whole does the same thing. We try to pride ourselves on being there for the client and being there for anybody who's approaching us and to do work.
Right.
So if communication is good, that makes my life so much easier, and it makes your life easier too. Things run so much smoother.
I think communication is a very good answer for any industry that you wish somebody would do better. I always say you can't over communicate. I mean, the worst case scenario is I'm like, this guy's calling me too much. But if you need to know, you need to know. Don't guess.
Yeah.
Especially in our industry. And then last question is, give some advice to the young John Porter back in first grade. What mistakes do you think you've made that you would want an up and coming architect to prevent?
If you're up and coming, you haven't started school or anything, I think the biggest thing is just finding an area you like.
Geographic area. Not a discipline of.
Yeah, not a discipline of architecture, because architecture as a whole, you can go into specialized disciplines like medical or whatever else that you want to practice in, and there's firms that specialize.
Okay.
But from an educational standpoint, pick where you want to live, from that start, because like I said, where you go to school at a lot of times is where you stay at.
Right.
Just based on connections.
But don't they have to go to, they don't have to go to Fairmont, that's if they're in West Virginia.
Yeah, that's in West Virginia.
What are some architecture schools in Pittsburgh that are?
There's plenty of them. There's Carnegie Mellon.
Big one.
Yeah, they're a good school.
Right.
They're costly, but they give you a good education.
They're what?
They're costly. They're
costly. Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, the education at Fairmont State is, $10,000 or less a year.
Wow.
Whereas I think Carnegie Mellon's like in the 60s.
I'm sure. That $10,000 or less was back when you went to school, right? Not current.
That's still what it is today.
No kidding. I might go to school for architecture.
Yeah. The biggest thing is, career-wise, is try not to set yourself up for failure in terms of student loans. That's the biggest thing, if you can do that and still get a great job and great education from it, it pays to do that.
So does Desmone, are they hiring?
They are,
Do they have interns?
They do, yeah. We actually
do you mentor?
I do, yeah. So I actually have two people that are interns that are, not me personally, but Desmone in the Morgantown office has two interns. We have one architecture and one in interiors.
Cool.
We just actually hired the interiors intern this week, so this is our first week. But I do mentor a little bit. So there's one of the girls, Emma. She's been working underneath me a lot on the residential side of things. So
how long have you been an architect?
I've been an architect for a year now, actually.
1 year?
Just 1 year.
Okay, and you're already mentoring? Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I mentor up and coming realtors as well. I love It's odd. I don't know if you knew this about yourself. I didn't know about myself, but I really like teaching.
Yeah.
I don't mean being a teacher. I don't want to be a teacher.
No,
but I like people coming to me and
sharing your knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Otherwise, I kind of feel like it's a waste if I'm just using it for myself daily.
Yeah.
When somebody else can benefit from it.
Well,
which is why we're doing the podcast, really. We're
sure,
trying to educate people watching.
Well, and the thing is, too, is like, you know, you didn't get to where you were without having other people like that in your life.
People mentored me. I've had coaches, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think you have to give back in a sense, but it's also, too, it helps me out, too, because, you know, the more I can train her and teach her to do things, and any other intern for that matter, you know, the better she becomes and the better she can help us out as a firm. You know, and architecture as a whole is a team sport. I mean,
I was just going to ask that.
It really is.
In real estate, we have teams within the brokerage. Do you guys have teams within
We do,
Desmone?
yeah. So the way Desmone is broken out, we actually have studios. So we're the West Virginia studio, and we have 7 people down there. And we have all our own projects and everything, you know, but if I'm busy, I can ask someone else in my office, like, hey, can you jump on this for a minute?
Right. You got on vacation or something?
Yeah, if you're on vacation, or, you know, just to share design ideas too, you know, because, you know, I may have a client that comes to me with a problem and I may not be able to figure it out.
Right.
And it could be just I've looked at the project too long and, you know, just you're burnt out on it, or, you know, you just don't have the right mindset for it. And you get someone else to look at it and they're like, oh, that's the answer.
Fresh
like,
eyes.
this is how you do it. You just get those fresh eyes and it really helps out.
But can you actually have a team?
Yeah.
Can you be the John Porter team and be the boss?
I mean, I guess, yeah.
I'm just kind of curious because in real estate we have, you know, this team, that team, whatever. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I think that's it. Do you have anything else you wanted to?
No, I think I'm good. I appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. I appreciate you coming all the way to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions about architecture, just wherever you're watching this, whether you got an email or you see it on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, post the comment and I'll make sure John gets it. If you have any questions about real estate ever at all, just let me know. Why? Because I know everything.